Let me give the stage to the next speaker. Hi, Pavel.
Hello,
Pavel
Stefan.
Jonis will be talking about a case study implementing P3 Express to comply with DORA regulations at a Lithuanian bank. So, Pavel, without much ado, the stage is yours.
Okay, I think you can see my screen now, right? And hello, everyone. My name is Pavel Jonis. I don't have a slide about myself, actually, and now I think that was a mistake. Well, my face will have to suffice in this case. I'm a professional project manager, and I have been doing that for 10 plus years. I have been mainly working with IT projects. However, I have also worked at with various other initiatives or changes. I have, for example, opened a basketball school here in Vilnius, and I've created an online community for a client of mine that were a product company, etc. But mainly, I'm interested in project management. I'm interested in teaching other people project management, and I'm interested in, well, spreading the joy of creating impactful changes that are implemented through projects within various organizations, right? And today we're going to talk about a specific organization, Monobankas. It is a bank that is a B2B bank, so it's not dealing with customers like me personally, right? But they have other businesses that they do work with. And they've been established in 2018 by people who have previously worked at bigger banks. So they knew the industry very well. They knew what to do. They knew what products to create. They knew very well and know very well as to where the market gaps are and so how to utilize them. This is also a throwback to the question that was presented to Nader, if we can give an example of several products that together create bigger value. You can think of a bank, right? In a bank, you have a card, you have an account, you have a possibility to pay with your phone, you have a possibility to take credit. And from bank's perspective, these are all different products, right? So those different products altogether create a service for you, a financial service for you personally, which Monobankas doesn't do, right? They do it for the businesses. And then in turn, it creates the better benefit both to the bank and or value and to their customers, right? So Monobankas has 100 plus employees, and they are doing what I would call a rapid expansion, but in a sustainable manner. So they want to be a responsible financial institution and actually do the expansion with the tools available, with the people available, and do it correctly in how they define that correctness and how they define that sustainability, right? So the question here, we do have a project and product management day. So I think it is a relevant question and something that I have witnessed a lot in product organizations is why use project management in general? And the answer is obvious. This is why project management practices were created in the first place. It is to increase the success of complex endeavors at whatever we define success, right? However we define success. And then to me, I think it's pretty obvious. And then to me, the more interesting question is why do we use project management system? You can call it procedure, framework, methodology. I use the word system because I use systems, P3 Express or P5 Express. All of those are project management systems. And if you want a better or more nuanced definition of what the difference is between a methodology and a system, I suggest you drop an email to Nader. He's really good at explaining that. But in general, I will be using these words, system, procedure, process, interchangeably, in a sense, meaning you use a systematic approach to project management. And for teams that are product organizations and that are focusing on products most of all, it is sometimes difficult or understandably annoying to think about a set of tasks that are project management that would be additional to what they already do. So creating a project description, creating a project plan, actually managing a risk register of some sort, etc., etc. These are oftentimes considered as a burden and an unnecessary complication of the work that we do with success or relative success already, and why should we do it at all? So before we jump into the answer, I will be talking about P3 Express. So we will be analyzing Monobank as an implementation case of P3 Express, right? I'm a P3 consultant. I'm a P3 Express believer. I have worked with Prince2 and PMBOK myself. I've worked in a big American corporation that ran their own project management framework that they call Global Project Management Framework, which was a very comprehensive and interesting system based on PMBOK. However, at the end of the day, I ended up with P3 Express because, in my viewpoint, it is practical enough. It has all the necessary components to run a successful project without overburdening the people using the system. It has, as you can see, the cycles that are easy to understand, easy to grasp, but at the end of the day, as all good things, a little bit complex and hard to master, right? You need to practice using the system in order to become a master in it. And, you know, the logical parts you can see here, project initiation, then monthly, weekly, daily management, project closure, and an interesting part, post-project management. We'll not go deeper into P3 Express. If you're interested, I highly suggest visiting P3 Express website, right? Or email Stefan, me, and Nader if you want to know more. That's fine. The main point is that we use this system for Monobankas, and we will be speaking about more generic things in a specific manner later on as to what value does using a system in general bring to an organization. So let's get to the answer of what actually happened. We start with a standard, right? So for those of you who do not know what DORA is, it is a European Union Regulation Act for financial institutions that talks mainly about IT, how to manage your IT in a financial institution, and specifically how to be aware of how to manage cybersecurity within a financial institution. And with that said, if you manage your IT, right, we have talked a little bit about ITIL and how its history began with IT management of processes and the whole service. We also need to understand that there are big changes happening with IT that are called projects. And Article 15 of DORA regulation talks specifically about project management. It is not a very extensive page. It's a one-pager. You can read it. I recommend you actually do if you are interested in project management systems and DORA specifically. But in general, what it says is that project management policy is a must, right? So procedure, policy, system, whatever you name the word, it is a must for financial institution, right? Also, elements such as objectives, governance, risk management, the normal things or the very generic things that you would associate with project management are in there in a very broad sense. And the last point that was interesting specifically to me is that staff dedicated to business activities must actually be included from the beginning of the project, right? And according to DORA then, well, if they include it specifically and outright, this could be an issue. So from their perspective, they actually see that not including certain stakeholders, right, might be an issue when doing big IT changes, like IT doing stuff on their own, not including business, et cetera, et cetera. So they say, whatever system, procedure, policy you use, you actually need to make sure that you include business people from the beginning of the project when creating the project purpose, when creating the project goals, or agreeing on the project purpose and agreeing on the project goals, et cetera, et cetera. So here we have a standard, right, that isn't very extensive, but it is mandatory. And this is how it all started. This is how our collaboration with Monobankas started. So I was brought in as part of an effort to ensure DORA regulation is adhered to. And then I was brought in specifically to discuss project management. Without a standard, there cannot really be compliance. To be compliant means adhering to a certain set of rules, to a certain set of regulations, or like ISO or something else, like in this case, DORA. The whole point of the exercise was to become standardized and thus compliant with the regulation as a financial institution. However, and this is an incredibly important point, the people that came to me said at once, we don't want a written document. We actually want a system that we will be able to use, utilize, and that will bring value to our project managers, increasing the success of the projects and something that we can use for years to come. So the beginning of a task is to be compliant. However, the purpose of it is to actually create a project management system that is usable and effective. Now, coming back to a broader perspective, if you're having a discussion within your organization whether you should or should not use a project management system, if you are not already, right, ask yourself, well, what do highly regulated institutions do? And I actually had this discussion after I have worked with Monobankas and presented this case to several other people. I have had a discussion with a manufacturing organization, with a tech company, regarding the fact that, okay, how do I sell the idea of a project management system to my stakeholders? And one of the ways to look at it is, even if we are not regulated, the highly regulated institutions like financial institutions, to them, it is already said, you need to run your IT projects and consequentially all of your other projects, because, well, you don't do policy just for IT projects. You most probably do the policy for all of your projects, right? If they are running it as a mandatory thing, we should look into it too, because that will probably lead to better results, right? And most importantly, higher project success, however we define success. So at this stage, it is a very strong point to already say that if financial institutions have it as a mandatory point, we should look into it too, right? And again, from my point of view, a bank, in a sense, apart from being a financial institution, is also a product organization that creates products again and again and again to be in front of the market, right? So a big portion of their operations is to actually maintain the products, but also they need to be innovative enough to create those new products, right? And for that, as Nader has already explained, we do have projects running throughout. So we move on. And the first thing that we do when creating and establishing a policy is actually agreeing on a dictionary. I have a fantastic story where I was in Switzerland back in 2014 or 15, I believe. And we had a consultant that was extremely experienced, a Swiss consultant. We only had 1.5 days for a project workshop, and he spent 1/3 of it, so a whole half a day, for us to just speak about the terminology used. The project was about phone recordings, and so we discussed things like what is a phone recording, what is a phone recording storage system, how many do we have, how do they work, how do we actually extract a phone recording if there is a request for it, etc., etc. So, and then we defined various levels of requests. What do they mean? How do we respond to them, etc. And then the rest of the workshop actually went pretty easily, and that was a life lesson for me. If you want for people to work together, and if you want them to agree, make sure they talk and speak in the same terms. So the first question I ask every time during my workshops, whenever I teach project management or wherever I facilitate project management training, I should put it, and specifically in talking with Monobankas was, okay, so what is a project? And I provided them with my definition, right? I love to get responses from both up and coming or starting project managers and very experienced project managers who have experience with 20 plus years. And so the answer usually is something of a like, okay, it's a temporary endeavor to achieve unique result. That is broad enough for many endeavors that we call projects. Now, it gets much more interesting, and think about your specific organizations of what is a project, right? In the IT department, or whatever your revenue generating department is. And then, for example, the back office. Does back office still use project management system when running their initiatives, even though sometimes they're quite big and expensive and expansive? Do we understand the project in the same way? Do we define it in a way that is tangible and usable? We can start with the definition that a project can be anything that higher management deems worthy of a project status. And it's not ideal, but really it's actually usable. In the real world, if a manager or CEO, CFO, CIO tells us that this is a project and we need to run it as per our policy and our procedure system, that's fine. We do it. And there are more objective factors like investment, right? Budgets, something that is over 10,000, 50,000, a million, right? Of monies used will be considered a project. A team size, 10, 20, 50 people, right? And then, of course, the last part is probably more contentious or difficult to begin with is man hours. Is it 50 hours? Is it 500 hours? Is it 1,000 or 10,000 hours? Something that we will be considering as a project. And in this case, I actually suggest you do this exercise is collect your relevant team members, get them in a room for 30, 60 minutes and ask them to write down what the project is within your own organization and have that open discussion. I can guarantee you will get some interesting responses, interesting answers, and you will get through that discussion to the truth. So this is what we did. We defined the project and project responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, right? And this is another interesting point, an incredibly contentious point, because roles and responsibilities actually lead to the levels of power. So the question is, in an organization that has already been defined with time and with their organizational structure, where do we fit in projects? Especially in a product-oriented organization where there are functional teams and there are product teams. This way, a project manager becomes a role, and that role needs to be clearly defined with a defined power level. And that is part of the dictionary discussion. It is not only about what a project manager does, like risk log, project planning, stuff like that, which is actually pretty easily definable and understandable to everyone, but also how does a system owner or a product owner, together with a functional team lead, fit into that whole project scope. P3 Express does not speak about that because it is broad enough and defines only two roles, that of a sponsor and that of a project manager. And in real world situations, such as in Monobankas, we had to go through the organizational structure and fit in those roles as to how they fit in a broader sense. And they need to be predefined for that specific organization in order to fit, in order to actually bring value, so that as to avoid the conflicts before the project starts, right? And so we also implement what the company terminology is being used. So archiving is probably the same. We just fit in the name of the system. So, okay, you archive the documents in this way because it is already defined. But there is also company terminology of what a business case is. And they may have a specific document that defines a business case, how it goes through the process of approval, what needs to be part of it. So to me, a business case theoretically is something that is actually before the project begins. But in terms of an actual case, you can actually go to simply, like this project initiation phase where we define the project and plan it, and business case can be part of that if a specific situation within an organization requires it. So in this case, you need to be flexible, and I will come back to flexibility. Right, we are here. And I will come back to flexibility again, but you need to go deep into what the organization does, into what terms do you already use. So after we define all these terms, including project plan and project risk management, different from organizational risk management that is present in the banks, we get understanding. And with this understanding, we can move forward. Practically, what it means is that it is not 1, 2, or 3 people defining a policy and then moving forward with it, but is actually including a lot of people from various parts of organization. Ask them, what does the project mean to you? What roles and responsibilities do you envision here? And then make a consensus of it which then in turn creates understanding. So you not only make them participate in a discussion, but you actually help them go through the process of reasoning of why we chose one term or the other, right? And with that understanding, of course, we will get a better result and people will start using system faster. So here we come to the question of governance. If you don't think about governance when thinking about project management system, you might not like use or think about project management system in general at all. Like it goes hand in hand. If you have a system or a process or procedure, you need governance. Theoretically, even without a system, we have that as an organizational structure, but we need to remember that a project is a mini organization, and thus we need to create specific ways of making decisions. And I will provide you with an example. Who makes decisions on run the project or not? Well, we could say a steering committee, right? But in this case, specific case, it is the board that will have to make those decisions because of how the organization is structured and because of what we defined as projects. So it goes hand in hand. What you define as a project then will feed directly into how you create the governance system for it. And it goes through all the levels. You have a sponsor, so you have a certain set of people who can be sponsors. Not everyone within the organization has an organizational power already defined by an organizational structure to have the power of a sponsor. And then you come to the project team. This is a very contentious point. I used to say that 90% of organizations make a mistake of not including everyone important from the project start. Now I say every organization that I meet actually has this issue in one way or another, in one, kind of, how should I say, spectrum of problematics from bigger to smaller issues, but everyone has issues on that front. And I will explain. So the first question is, can I, as project manager in an existing functional organization, come in and assign anyone to a project? Can they be part of a project just because I say so? Or do I need to go through a certain approval? Do I need to inform the person about that? And the more organizations I speak to, including Monobankas, the more obvious it is that somehow organizations are very clumsy in working in that matrix organization and assigning their own people to various initiatives while they simultaneously have to do either operational work on the product or maintaining the product or creating smaller changes. And now comes in a big project initiative where we either create a new product or adjust the existing product so vastly that we need to call it a project. And then it creates tensions and it creates conflicts. The most simple example is a tester, in my honest opinion, or people who plan testing should be included from the get-go. They should be included as your first step as a project manager. Let's include not only architects and developers from the IT perspective, but also the testers who will design the end result of the product and how will that look like. Because then not only their buy-in and engagement, but understanding of the value that we try to create, or value proposition that we try to create with the project will increase exponentially, right? And if we don't consider in their availability, their actually, what Alexandra said, emotions, right? Then it will create conflicts, it will create friction in the long run. So think about governance, think about the power of a project manager. The last point I will touch is that by creating a system and by using and implementing a system, you can actually empower the project manager to make better decisions. And those decisions are reflected through assigning custodians. So in P3 Express, we use something that is called a follow-up register. You may be more familiar with terms like RAID log or risk register. And so a custodian is what you may be familiar with the term owner, right? So it's a risk owner, issue owner. We call them custodians, various reasons. Won't get into that right now, but that is the term of people who are responsible for certain problematic or possibly problematic aspects of the project. And that is decided as a project team, but the project manager as a facilitator has the power to make decisions for whom to delegate these things. This is what I call upwards delegation, and it is essential for any project manager to master. And instead of just relying on project managers' soft power of discussing, negotiating, etc., let's give them power within the system. And let's make it official that they can actually make these decisions with the knowledge of those people, and thus create this upwards delegation system that allows us to broaden the responsibilities of those involved in the project and not just focus, okay, this is project management's job. He or she is the only one who will do it. The last two aspects of why a project management system is important or how it should look like is the flexibility. I define flexibility here in the breadth of how broad of initiatives of projects can the system actually cover. And this breadth is incredibly important when we talk about an organization that has various products and that has various functions. You cannot focus just on IT. You need to think of as many situations as possible. The initial reaction I oftentimes get when I come in with P3 Express, especially from experienced project managers, is that of skepticism. And it is natural. Here comes in Pavel and will tell us how to do our job. Well, that's not the case. I make suggestions. And if people see that the system, that is P3 Express or any other system, is actually adaptable enough to make sense in their own context and or situations, they will buy in and they will start using it. The funny fact is that while we were creating Monobanka's policy, the people who were involved in that discussion have already started using it while we were in the process of finalizing it. So without the full knowledge, just by being curious and actually seeing the flexibility of the system, they started using it as to help them structure their own work and approach that was intuitive and most probably successful. However, not necessarily unified organization-wise. So the last point I want to touch is, of course, education. And the obvious part is creating training. Just if you manage a policy, a project management policy, create one, want to install one, or want to refresh the knowledge of, don't create training if you do work with a specific organization. Don't create training that is too broad, right? We have various methodologies, etc., and those are meant for certification. If you want P3 Express certification, which is valid throughout European Union, right? Go for it. Train in P3 Express and get a certificate for that. However, if you want your people to use P3 Express, talk about project management within the context of your own organization. To that end, I actually created additional visuals, additional dictionary, and specific role descriptions that were adapted to Monobankas before conducting the training. And I went through that material with the people responsible within the organization so that we are not talking about a generic system and or methodology, but we are talking about their own organization. Another aspect of that is that P3 Express as a system contains something that is called peer review. Stefan, I know I'm on 1 minute over the line, just a couple more minutes and I will be over. So peer review is an exercise where you, as a project manager, go to another project manager, provide them the documentation or your, how should I say it, assets that you create through the project management process and ask them for feedback. It is a very simple, informal process that can be formalized if and when needed. The interesting part is that this particular aspect was very contentious from the project manager's perspective, but was pushed through the C-level management. And that is because the C-level management needs to think about business continuity, right? And so when we think about business continuity, we have to think about education. They are extremely related. People come and go within your organization, but if you have a system in place, it in turns creates project management culture. Just this week, in the beginning of the week, I had a discussion, a very interesting one. Does having project management system create culture of good project management, or does existing good project management culture create then a system? And I think it could be both, but I am leaning towards having the answer that if you have a system and you use it, you educate your people on it, and they're utilizing it, you will in turn create a long-lasting and, well, actually consistent and useful, valuable project management culture. So I come full circle to that same question. Why do we use project management system in product-oriented organizations? I try to provide you with my own personal, practical experience as to what do we get. It's not only about compliance, right? It is about understanding. It is about decision-making power, buy-in, and business continuity from the people involved. So it benefits everyone from project management and project team level to actually C-level and board. I am very open to any and all questions, and if not, well, let's talk during the panel.
Thank you very much, Pavel. As you noticed, you went a bit over the time, so I suggest we handle the questions as part of the panel discussion.